When Playboy founder Hugh Hefner died in 2017, his interment took place in Los Angeles, at Westwood Memorial Park. Hefner was laid to rest in a crypt he had purchased in 1992, next to that of Hollywood legend Marilyn Monroe. Monroe had appeared on the cover, and as the first nude centerfold, for the magazine's first issue in December 1953. Contrary to popular belief, Monroe did not pose for the then unknown Playboy. Hefner purchased existing photographs of the star for inclusion in his new magazine. The man who became famous as Heg simply exploited her image to help launch his publishing and entertainment empire. His use of Monroe's image was part of a pattern which continues 6 decades after her death. Marilyn Monroe has captivated the world since she first appeared on film in the 1950s, for her looks, her fragility, her relationships with powerful men, the tragic circumstances of her life, and for the mysterious circumstances of her untimely death. She became the epitome of the Hollywood blonde bombshell, though she was not the first, nor hardly the last. Her image, as fashioned by Andy Warhol, became a cultural icon in the 1970s. Her legend is a blend of fact, fiction, unsubstantiated rumors, innuendo, exploitation, surmise, and simple gossip. Yet in all, the real Marilyn Monroe is overwhelmed. In 2000, a novel by Joyce Carol Oates was released, creating a new, fictionalized Marilyn Monroe. Oates created fictional identities for many of the characters in her novel, leaving it to the reader to discern their real-life counterpart, such as C. for Tony Curtis, or the ex-athlete for Joe DiMaggio. Her heavily fictionalized and salacious tale was the basis for a made-for-TV movie in 2001, and for the 2022 film Blonde. The novel and films exploit and expand upon legends, myths, and factually unsupported stories from the life of Marilyn Monroe, unfortunately believed by many to be biographical rather than sensational fabrication. Here is the story of Marilyn Monroe and some of the unsupported tales told about her over the decades since her death. Norma Jean Mortensen was born on June 1, 1926, to Gladys Pearl Baker, a Mexican migrant worker. Young Norma Jean was the result of a workplace affair between her mother and co-worker Charles Gifford. The father did not acknowledge his responsibility nor paternity, and Gladys was at the time married to her second husband, a man named Martin Mortensen. Fatherhood was not high on Mortensen's list of priorities either. He vanished from Norma Jean's life following a divorce from her mother in 1928. Norma and her mother lived with friends off and on during her childhood, and Gladys moved from job to job. Eventually, she was able to purchase a small home for herself and her daughter, in Hollywood in 1933. The following year, when Norma was 17, her mother suffered what was then euphemistically called a nervous breakdown. It was the beginning bout with paranoid schizophrenia, which would keep Gladys institutionalized for the rest of her life. The state of California took over responsibility for Norma. The teenager became a ward of the state, residing in different foster homes over the ensuing 4 years, as well as in an orphanage between homes. In 1942, Norma's foster family was transferred for employment reasons. California law prevented Norma, still a minor and a ward of the state, from accompanying them. Faced with a return to an orphanage, Norma opted for marriage to free herself from state control. On June 19, 1942, the then 16-year-old married James Dougherty, then employed in defense work in Los Angeles. Norma quit high school. She had attended Van Nuys High but was an indifferent student and lived with her new husband. Dougherty enlisted in the United States Merchant Marine in 1943, and the couple moved to a home in Catalina. The following year he went to sea, and Norma entered a defense factory, one of the thousands of American housewives who became Rosie the Riveter during the war years. It was while working for the radioplane company that Norma began her modeling career. She quit her defense job in January 1945, posing instead for morale-boosting photographs of life on the home front. In August, with the war coming to an end, Norma signed with an agency to work full-time as a model and sometime actress. She was soon in demand as a model for pin-ups, postcards, and advertising. In 1946, Norma dyed her reddish-brown hair, becoming a blonde, and had its natural curls straightened. That same year, she drew the attention of Hollywood producer Darryl F. Zanuck. With a 6-month acting contract in hand, Norma adopted the stage name Marilyn Monroe, divorced her sailor husband, and embarked on her new career. By then she had appeared on the cover of nearly 3 dozen magazines. Marilyn took her career as an actor seriously, and assiduously studied her new craft. Hollywood, in the form of the moguls still exploiting the studio system, were little impressed with her abilities on screen. Instead, Marilyn was used as a hostess for Hollywood parties and gatherings, tasked with entertaining motion picture moguls and their would-be investors. Small parts in musicals and a few low-budget stage productions whetted her appetite for an acting career, but roles eluded her. In 1948, she signed a contract with Columbia, though she continued to find little demand for her in films. She did find that Columbia executives wanted her to fill the time-honored image of the blonde bombshell. Columbia lightened her hair still further, creating the platinum blonde look which remained throughout her career. Following the end of her Columbia contract, she returned to modeling, including posing for nude calendars and pin-ups. She also worked in advertising, under the tutelages of the William Morris Agency and its vice president Johnny Hyde. Hyde became her mentor, lover, and chief promoter. It was under his guidance she finally landed roles in major Hollywood productions, including All About Eve and The Asphalt Jungle, though her roles were small. Hyde used the good reviews she garnered to negotiate a contract with 20th Century Fox for 7 years. Shortly after Marilyn signed with Fox, Hyde died of a heart attack, leaving her emotionally devastated and without a champion in the studios of Hollywood. Although Marilyn's roles were often stereotyped in the early 1950s, that of the dazzling blonde primarily in the film as comic relief and to brighten up the sets, her star began to rise. Critics, including the influential New York Times film critic Bosley Crowther, praised her work. Crowther called her superb in the Fox film As Young as You Feel, though the picture was only moderately successful. But audiences noticed the blonde despite the paucity of screen time. So did fellow Hollywood stars. By 1952, Marilyn was known for dating several of Hollywood's leading men, including Yul Brynner, Peter Lawford, director Nicholas Ray, William Holden, and former New York Yankees star Joe DiMaggio. By 1953, she was still without a critically acclaimed film performance, yet she was a major star. Scandals over her admission to having posed nude for photographers did little to slow her rising to stardom. She also provided titillating interviews, claiming she often chose not to wear any undergarments in an age when most mature women routinely wore girdles. She was provocative and at the same time innocent, combining sexual allure with childlike naivete, creating her own image in defiance of the blonde bombshell reputation preferred by the studio moguls in Hollywood. In 1953, Marilyn Monroe emerged as a major Hollywood star, her image both exploited by the studios and by the actor herself. The studios wanted a dumb blonde image, sexy and stupid. Marilyn delivered in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and How to Marry a Millionaire. That same year, Hugh Hefner used Marilyn's image on the cover of the first issue of his new magazine, Playboy. He also presented nude photos of the actor within the magazine, taken years earlier and purchased from the photographer. Hefner's exploitation of the star's rising popularity ensured the success of his venture. Marilyn's successes in 1953 led to her being in demand for other roles, as well as public appearances, but it also led to her being typecast. Marilyn resented the dumb blonde image studio executives viewed as bankable, and actively sought other types of roles. The blonde bombshell sex symbol image was another matter. She exploited her allure, using it and its box office power to demand roles which would cement her position as a serious, dramatic actress.